Atiku, federal government should adopt my manifesto. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar and the presidency yesterday squabbled over the state of the nation, especially the tottering economy. Atiku, the People's Democratic Party (PDP) 2023 presidential candidate, who took a swipe at the President Bola Tinubu's leadership, advising him to eat the humble pie and adopt some of the policies in his manifesto in order to turn around the economy for good. But the presidency, in its response, said if Atiku had won the 2023 presidential election, which held March last year, Nigeria would have been worse under his watch. In a long statement personally signed, Atiku said he had been inundated with questions as to what he would have done differently if he was at the helm of affairs of the country. He stated, I'm not the president Tinubu is. The focus should be on him and not on me or any other. I believe that such inquiries distract from the critical question of what Tinubu needs to do to save Nigerians from the excruciating pain arising from his trial and error economic policies. However, I understand and appreciate the challenges faced by citizens in seeking alternatives to what is not working for them. I hope Tinubu and members of his administration are humble enough to borrow one or two things from our ideas in the interest of the Nigerian people. I would now go ahead and articulate some of our ideas that would have had the potential to transform our beloved country, he said. On subsidy removal, Atiku pointed out that he has always advocated for the removal of subsidy on petrol because its administration has been mildly put opaque with so much scope for arbitrariness and corruption. He insisted that mind-boggling rent profits from oil subsidy accrued to the cabals in public institutions and the private sector. I would have prioritized the following. First, tackling corruption. Fighting corruption should have commenced with repositioning of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited (NNPC) with a huge beneficiary of the status quo. Its commitment to reform and capacity to implement and enforce reforms is suspect. The subsidy regime has provided an avenue for rent seeking, and the NNPC and its guidance will be threatened by reforms, the former vice president added. Second, paying particular attention to Nigeria's poor refining infrastructure. We are by far the most inefficient organization of petroleum exporting countries, OPEC member country, in terms of both the percentage of installed refining capacity that works and the percentage of crude refined. We would have commenced the privatization of all state-owned refineries and ensure that Nigeria starts to refine at least 50% of its current crude oil output. Nigeria should aspire to export 50% of that capacity to ECOWAS member states. He stated that he would have adopted a gradualist approach in the implementation of the subsidy reforms, highlighting that subsidies would have not been removed suddenly and completely. Atiku said during his time as vice president, the government adopted a gradualist approach, and that has completed phase 1 and 2 of the reform before the tenure ended. He stated, the incoming administration in 2027 abandoned the reforms. Unfortunately, the majority of the countries that review or rationalize subsidy payments adopt a gradualist approach by phasing price increases or shifting from universal to targeted approach. Malaysia 2022 and Indonesia 2022 to 2023. In many European Union economies, complete withdrawal often takes 5 years to effect. The gradualist approach allows for adjustment, adaptation, and minimizes disruptions and vulnerability. Atiku said he would have implemented a robust social protection program that would support the poor in navigating the cost of living challenges arising from reform implementation. He explained, we would have invested the savings from subsidy withdrawal to strengthen the productive base of the economy through infrastructure maintenance and development to improve outcomes in education and healthcare delivery, to improve rural infrastructure and support livelihood expansion in agriculture and develop the skills and entrepreneurial capacity of our youth in order to enhance their access to better economic opportunities. On a general level, Atiku said he would have planned better and more robustly, stating that his reform would have benefited from more adequate preparation, more sufficient diagnostic assessment of the country's condition, more consultations with key stakeholders, and better ideas for the final destination. According to him, we would have been guided by my robust reform agenda as encapsulated in my covenant with Nigerians, my policy document that sought to, among others, protect our fragile economy against much deeper crises by preventing business collapse. Our document had spelled out policies that were consistent and coherent. We would have sequenced my reforms to achieve fiscal and monetary congruence, unleashing reforms to determine an appropriate exchange rate, cost reflective electricity tariff, and PMS price at one and the same time is certainly an overkill. He said the bullish money tightening spree by the Central Bank of Nigeria CBN was also an issue. He stressed that as importer of premium motor spirit PMS and other petroleum products, removing subsidy on these products without a stable exchange rate was counterproductive. Atiku stated, we would have been more strategic in our response to reform fallout, would not overestimate the efficacy of the reform measures or underestimate the potential cost of reforms. I would recognize the reforms could sometimes fail. I would not underestimate the numerous delivery challenges, including the weakness of our institutions, and would work assiduously to correct the same. I would, as a responsible leader, pause, reflect, and when necessary, review implementation. Atiku said he would have led by example. He added, any fiscal reform to improve liquidity and the management of our fiscal resources must first eliminate revenue leakages arising from governance, including the cost of running the government and the government procurement process. I and my team would not have lived in the luxury while the citizens wallow in misery. We would have communicated more effectively with the people with civility, tact, and diplomacy. Transparent communication with the public is essential to build public trust, which in turn is important to ensure that the public understands what the government is doing. We would have consulted more with all stakeholders to learn, negotiate, adapt, and modify, among other policy goals. We would have demonstrated more empathy. My reforms would wear a human face, would have been more strategic in design and implementation of reform fallout, mitigating measures. I would not run a palliative economy yet. We would have a robust social protection program that will offer genuine support to the poor and vulnerable and provide immediate comfort and security to enable them navigate the storming seas. Besides, Atiku said he would have undertaken extensive reforms of public sector institutions to maximize reform impact with special focus on security. He said he would have commenced from day one on reform of the security institutions with improved funding and enhanced welfare. He stated that his policy document that spelled out a special presidential welfare initiative for security personnel, and he would have adopted alternative approaches to conflict resolution such as diplomacy, intelligence, improved border control, deploying traditional institutions, and good neighborliness. In addition, Atiku said he would have launched an economic stimulus fund (ESF) with an initial investment capacity of approximately 10 billion US dollars to support small businesses across all economic sectors. Alongside the ESF, he stated that he would have launched a uniquely designed skills to job program that targets all categories of youth, including graduates, early school leavers, as well as the massive numbers of uneducated youth currently not in education, employment, or training. He said to underscore our commitment to the development of infrastructure, an infrastructure development unit (IDU) directly under the president, which would have come into operation. The IDU would have a coordinating function and a specific mandate of working with the MDAs to fast track the implementation of the infrastructure reform agenda with the framework provided herein. The IDU will hit the ground running in putting the building blocks for our private sector driven infrastructure development fund (IDF) of approximately 25 billion US dollars to engender fiscal efficiency and promote accountability and transparency in public fiscal management. Would have committed to a review of the current fiscal support to ailing state-owned enterprises. Would have also begun a process review of government procurement processes to ensure value for money and eliminate all leakages.